Of course, as always, we need to deal with the question of motifs, and this is not going to be terribly surprising, given that I've told you that the Neoclassical is very much a return to the Greek and Roman aesthetic. We're going to see classical motifs. We're going to see Greek and Roman columns, Greek and Roman symbolism, Greek and Roman ideas. So many of the motifs that we talked about in the Greek and Roman world will resurface here. We are going to see some new motifs based on those, such as the Patera. Now, the Patera, as you see on the left, is actually a very shallow drinking vessel commonly used in ancient Greece. But when you look straight down at it, it gives you this medallion form, frequently with a raised center. Well, they're going to use that as a decorative image, frequently for plasterwork that you would see on a ceiling or more commonly on a wall. We will see the use of husks. And husks are basically, you'll have a flower of some form, and then you'll have a series of flowers falling from that spot. They're usually going to be connected, and typically, although this isn't quite as typical as I'd like, they start with a larger husk and move to a smaller form as they move down. It creates a nice declining line, something that's very comforting for us as humans. The swan will be quite common. Now, the swan is going to speak to a lot of the ideas of France during this revolutionary period. The swan is graceful, the swan is elegant, and so it's going to be used for that purpose, frequently drawing people into the image, drawing in those ideas. We'll see it on chairs, we'll see it on candle stands. It just gives us a sense of elegance. Then we have the Phrygian Cap, and the Phrygian Cap is going to be associated with freed slaves. This actually comes from the ancient world. In this case on the left, you're seeing an example that's basically a reproduction from the ancient world. And here we see a Roman, probably a Roman, maybe a Greek, wearing this Phrygian cap. Now, slavery was much more common in the ancient world, but that cap would be worn to tell people that you were a freed slave. In other words, you no longer have to do these activities. The French will pick it up, especially during the Revolution, on the liberal side, the more liberal side. And when we talk about the French Revolution, it's easiest to talk about the more conservative side and the more liberal side because there's about 30 groups on each side. But the more liberal side will use the Phrygian cap as a symbol that they want to be freed from the shackles of the French monarchy and the current French governing system. Then we have the use of the Roman fasces. Now, in Rome, the fasces is a symbol of power. Here we see it in a very famous sculpture by Houdin of George Washington. He's leaning on the fasces, and they generally refer to unity. A bunch of different groups being drawn together. In the case of the United States and Washington, that's the original 13 states. In the case of the French, it's generally referring to these different classes working together. We're going to see a lot from mythology. Here we have two very famous pieces of art, one by David, the Oath of the Herati, where we see 3 Roman soldiers giving an oath that they will either die in battle or return victorious. And their father is giving him that oath. While over here, we see a famous sculpture of Pauline, Napoleon's sister of all people, by Canova, being depicted as Venus. We know because she's actually, it's not great in this image, but she's actually holding an apple, a symbol of Venus. So we're going to see mythology come in, but when you see mythology, it usually has metaphorical meaning. So it's sort of like Aesop's fables. There's always a story behind the image that you're looking at. You want to find that story, and it gives you an allusion to the lesson you're supposed to take from it. In the case of the Oath of the Herati, brotherhood, fraternity, the idea of great honor and being willing to die for the state. In the case of Pauline and Canova, don't ever sculpt Napoleon's sister nude. It's going to end poorly for you. Or, referring to this idea of fertility and everything else. There's a whole story to that one, and you can always find it elsewhere on my YouTube channel. We also see bees and winged victory by the time we get to Napoleon. Now, he likes these for different reasons. Bees tend to be a symbol of industry. In other words, if everyone works really hard together like bees, then we will be victorious. So it's a very common symbol associated with Napoleon, but he will also bring back the symbol of winged victory. Winged victory in the ancient world is a personification of victory or fame. It's a symbol to show that this person in an image was victorious. So you'll see this winged woman coming up, usually with a laurel wreath, setting it on someone's head. In Napoleon's case, he's bringing it back to show the victories of France and how victorious he is on the battlefield. This should not be mistaken for angels. Typically, winged victory is going to have far more feminine features, whereas angels tend to be a little more ambiguous in terms of gender because biblically they have no gender. In the US, we will see the ship and the eagle. The ship refers to the War of 1812. Some early Americans would have seen that as the true Revolutionary War because that is the first time we went to war again with the English. And that was primarily a situation where we had naval combat, and so the ship becomes very important. The eagle, of course, being the national bird and tends to be seen a lot in American furniture and American neoclassical pieces, but we also see it associated with Napoleon because the eagle was associated with ancient Rome and the Roman Empire. So we see those associations as well. It takes on different meaning whether you're looking at an American example or a French example.